Jake here for American Muscle, and in this video we're taking a look at the Five8 Industries SS Sport Coil-Over Kit fitting 2011 to 2023 Chargers, excluding Scat Pack and Hellcat models. Whether it's that low stance, improved handling, or maybe a little bit of both that you're after, this kit from Five8 Industries is going to get you there. It features lots of adjustability and some pretty solid construction and a low price, so it'll be an accessible addition to any build. There's quite a bit of stuff to talk about here, so let's get right to it. The eagle-eyed among you may have already spotted it, but this setup is height adjustable. So it's definitely going to lower the stance of your charger. Now, if you want to keep it closer to the stock height, you can dial this all the way up, or if you want to absolutely slam it, just drop them down. This kit should give you between 1 and 3 inches of lowering front and rear. Just use the included tools to spin these collars down and get them adjusted to sit exactly how you want. And these are going to adjust right here on the coils up front, and you're going to adjust the spring perches in the rear. Now, these are monotube dampers, both front and rear, so they're going to be a bit stiffer than your factory shocks. So expect that going in. Now, you also, of course, get new springs, both front and rear, to compensate for the lower ride height. Since you're getting less suspension travel when your car is lowered, things need to be stiffer to compensate. However, these are not going to totally ruin the ride of your car. It is, of course, going to be a bit stiffer. Now, having things be a bit stiffer means that your handling will be improved as well. Since everything is stiffer, there's going to be less movement, less body roll, and thus more control over the car. So if you want to make a serious improvement to your charger's cornering prowess, these are going to help you out. Now, of course, since these are a coilover kit, the fronts come pre-assembled, and you've got everything you need for the rears as well, making this a bolt-in setup, so you don't have to do any kind of modifications to the car, but we'll talk more about that in a few moments. The bodies of the shocks are 52 millimeters in diameter, and they're made from electroplated carbon steel. You've got 20 millimeter and 14 millimeter hardened piston rods front and rear respectively, making for a pretty strong setup. Now, inside of the shocks, you're going to find 44 millimeter high flow CNC machined 6061 aluminum floating pistons with polyurethane oil seals and multi-thickness valving shims. So all that to say is that these are not just some standard shock. The springs are also worth noting, as they are SAE 9254 cold wound steel, meaning that the metal hasn't been heated and subsequently weakened in the process. As we discussed earlier, these do have higher spring rates than your stock ones, meaning that they will be stiffer than your factory springs. Now, the bodies of the shocks are finished in this nice blue coating, and your springs are finished in a white powder coat as well, so everything should be pretty resistant to rust and corrosion. Your collars are the same deal, and you get the shims and the bushings that you need included in this kit as well. So again, everything is going to bolt right in, and they come out of the box pretty much exactly as you see them here, ready to go onto the car. Pricing might just be the biggest win here, as the whole kit, as you see it, is only going to run you about $750. And for a set of adjustable coilovers, that's about as inexpensive as they come. Now, while these don't have adjustable damping or adjustable camber plates, this is a pretty solid setup for a street-driven car. It's going to make for a great stance and improved handling, so it's a pretty good value for your money. Installation is going to get a 3 out of 3 and should take you around 5 hours to complete. Now, that is because there is quite a bit of stuff to do, and it's going to take some time to get this done right. However, since these are coilovers, you don't need to mess with the spring compressor, and the parts are going to simply bolt in. Just know that it's going to take you some time. You're going to need to take some measurements and make adjustments to get the ride height exactly where you want it as well. So that's why we're building in some extra time and a little bit of extra difficulty. With that though, let's head on out to the install bay and we'll show you how to get this done.
The tools you'll need for this project are a 1/2 inch and a 3/8 drive impact gun, a 3/8 drive ratchet, a 1/2 inch drive ratchet, a 13, a 15, and a 16 millimeter swivel socket, a 21, a 15, a 13, a 12, and a 10 millimeter socket, an 18 millimeter wrench, a 13/16 and a 7/8 inch wrench, a tape measure, a long extension, a short and a long pry bar, and a ball peen hammer. Hi everyone, today we're installing a coilover kit on our charger, but first let's watch a short video on how to uninstall the stock suspension. First thing we're going to do is loosen this upper control arm nut first, not fully remove it, just loosen it so that we can break it loose. And we're going to be using our 18 millimeter socket and our impact gun. Now that we've got it loose, what we'll do is we'll hit this with a hammer just to break the control arm free from the steering knuckle. Now just be careful not to hit this rubber boot, because you don't want to damage it and cause any grease leaks. Now we'll remove our sway bar link nut here using our 21mm socket. Now you may run into a situation like what we have here, where you try to take off that sway bar link nut and the whole thing just spins. If that happens, you can just use a 21mm or a 13/16mm wrench and a 10mm socket and separate the two that way. Now we'll remove our lower strut mount bolt using our 18mm socket. Now we'll remove the upper strut cover cap and two of the 13mm nuts, and we'll loosen the third one. Now we can go ahead and remove our upper ball joint nut and then our last remaining strut bolt at the top. Now you can let this hang a little bit, but not too much because of the brake hoses up here. And then we remove that upper nut. Now I like to put this back on just to keep it from flopping around and causing any damage while we're taking care of the rest of it. Now you want to repeat this process for the other side. Now for the rear, the first thing we're going to do is remove the two upper shock bolts using our 16mm socket. Now we'll remove the lower shock bolt using a 15mm socket and an 18mm wrench. Now the next thing is there's a couple of exhaust hangers back here and right here that we need to take out so that we can gain access to our lower control arm bolt. We're going to use our 13mm socket to remove those hangers. Now at this point, since we're up on a lift, we're going to be using a pole jack to support our lower control arm here and make sure that we keep tension on that coil spring, because it is dangerous when you try to remove these and it may pop out on you. If you're doing this at home, you can do this with the floor jack as long as the vehicle is properly supported. Now you want to make sure that you put some tension on this lower control arm using this pocket as your stabilizing point. Now we can go ahead and remove the bolt using our 15mm socket and our 18mm wrench. Now you can carefully lower the control arm to release the tension on the spring, and then we can remove the spring and the shock. Now you can repeat that process for the other side. All right, before we can get this installed in our vehicle, there's a couple things that we need to take care of first. One, the front strut does not come with a preload on the spring, so we are going to have to adjust for that. Next thing we're going to have to do is adjust for the actual ride height, and that's going to be done at the bottom end here. So let's go ahead and get this preload set so that we can go ahead and focus on the bottom end. Now, as you can see, this is where you want to start with the spring just being able to turn, still having the lock collar at the bottom. And then what we'll do is we'll measure that. Now you can do this a couple of ways. The easiest way I found is just do it from the mounting point on the top of the strut. Go down. Right now, the natural length of the spring is 10 inches. So what we want to do is put a preload on that so that it doesn't move around and it actually works like it's supposed to. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this spring, we're going to put tension on this spring, and we're going to move the bottom end of it up about just under 1/4 of an inch. 3 to 5 millimeters is what the manufacturer recommends. So let's go ahead and take care of that. And what you're gonna need are the 2 wrenches that come with the kit. So the larger of the 2 is gonna be for this upper collar. The smaller wrench is gonna be for the smaller collar underneath it. So we'll use our small wrench on the bottom collar, get that loosened up, and then we can use the larger of the 2 wrenches to turn the spring collar, the upper collar. We'll turn that and put that preload on that spring. All right, so now we're just shy, or just over 9 3/4 of an inch, which is about where we want to be. So now we can go ahead and spin our bottom collar up, and using the smaller wrench, go ahead and lock that into place. Now using these wrenches on these collars while we're adjusting it is fine. Once we get it on the car, what you're going to want to do is use a flathead screwdriver and a hammer or a flat punch to go ahead and lock these in. Now, once we've got that set, the preload is set on here, now we can go ahead and adjust for the ride height itself. And the ride height is going to be adjusted by this bottom collar here, right above the body. So we'll loosen that up. Now we've already done some of the pre-work for you and determined that starting at 24 inches from the top of the strut cap to the center of the mounting hole at the bottom is about a good place to start. So we'll go ahead and measure this. And we're just about 24 inches now. So we've got our collar loosened up. We'll go ahead and spin this down. Take our measurement. Still a little short. And now you can see we are at 24 inches from the top of the strut mount to the center of the lower mounting hole. Like I said, it's a good place to start. Go ahead and turn your collar down. Snug that up. And now do the same thing on the other strut to get them both set exactly the same. And then we'll move to the rear spring and the rear shock. Now you'll notice on the rear spring that we have a flat side on one of the end of the spring and a rounded end on the other side. The rounded end is going to be the bottom of your spring. This is going to be the top. And what you're going to want to do is set your preload on the ride height for the spring using this adjustable collar here. And again, we've done some of the pre-work for you, so we've got a good idea of where you can start. Now what I recommend doing is measuring from the bottom of the nylon washer here to the very bottom of this mounting plate. As long as you've got just about an inch, that's a good place to start, in my opinion. So we'll go ahead, just like the front, lock our 2 collars together. So we've got our big one and our smaller one. Just snug those up. And now our spring is ready to go. Now, as far as the shock ride height goes, this is one that we're going to wait until we've got everything else assembled in it, and then we'll do some measurements, figure out exactly what the distance is that we need to be at, and then we'll go ahead and adjust that as well. All right, now that we've got our preload set and our height adjustment set, we can go ahead and install our front strut. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that the single stud is facing to the outside of the vehicle, and the sway bar link tab is pointed towards the inside. Now we can go ahead and slide this back up into place, and loosely attach the nuts to the top of the strut just to hold it in place while we finish attaching the bottom. So we'll slide that into place, attach our nuts at the top. Now that we've got that held into place, we go ahead and reconnect our steering knuckle to our upper control arm and finish installing the bottom half of the strut. We'll attach our nut to it, make sure it's secured into place. Now at this point, what you may want to do is use a pry bar to pry down on the control arm to hold that ball joint stud in place while you go ahead and tighten this up. And we'll go ahead and tighten down our nut using our 18mm sock wrench. So like I said, we're trying to tighten this up and the stud is actually spinning. So we'll just use our pry bar to pry down on that to hold it in place. Now because this is a shorter strut, we will need to lift up on our steering knuckle to get our lower strut mount into place. And to do that, we're going to use our pry bar to lift up on this bottom control arm and put this into place. Now you notice that the new struts do come with new nuts because the original nut from this stock strut was welded onto the bottom of the strut. The new ones do not have that, so they include a new nut for you. And what you'll need for that is a 7/8 inch wrench and your 18mm socket to go ahead and tighten this up. Now we'll go ahead and get our nut started. And then we'll use our 7/8 wrench on the nut and our 18mm socket on the bolt and tighten it down. Now we can go ahead and attach our sway bar end link. And to do that, we're just going to lift up on our sway bar till it lines up, insert it, and then put our nut back on. Now we can go ahead and tighten that down with our 21mm socket. Now once we've got our front strut assembly completely installed, we can go ahead and tighten down this lock nut at the top to make sure that the ride height stays the same. And to do that, you're going to want to use either a large flathead screwdriver or in our case a small pry bar or a flat punch and a hammer. And just go ahead and put that into the locking ring. Now, it might be a little bit difficult for you to see this just because of the tight space that we're working in. But you're just going to put this into one of the locking tabs there. Give it a couple of taps with your hammer. Make sure that it's locked into place. And now we can go ahead and repeat this process for the other side. Now before we install our rear spring, you do want to make sure that you remove this upper isolator for the stock spring and get that out of the way. Once that's removed, we can go ahead and set our rear spring into place and reconnect our lower control arm. So we want to make sure our ride height adjuster is on the top. Set that into place. And now we can go ahead and raise our lower control arm and get it reattached. You want to make sure our adjuster collar is on the dimple at the top, and then go ahead and line up your lower control arm. We'll raise our lower control arm up, align our hole in the control arm with the subframe. All right, and once we've got your lower control arm raised up into position, you may need to use a small pry bar to go ahead and insert it between the control arm and the mounting point and just kind of push it out a little bit to get the holes to line up. Once you've got the holes lined up, go ahead and slide your bolt through. Now we can go ahead and put our nut on and tighten it down. So we'll put our nut on the other side. And then using our 18mm wrench and our 15mm socket, go ahead and tighten that down. Now at this point, you notice we haven't got the shock installed yet. And the reason for that is we need to adjust the shock to our actual ride height in order to make sure that it's set up properly. So what you're going to want to do is go ahead and install the spring on the other side, and then what you'll do is put your tires on all the way around the vehicle, set it down on the ground, check your ride height, make sure it's where you want it to be. If that's good, then what you'll do is go ahead and lift it back up, remove your tires, and then measure the distance from where the shock mounts at the top to the center of the shock mounting hole at the bottom. Once you've got that distance, then you go ahead and set up your shock with the ride height adjustment to that measurement, and then go ahead and install your shock. Now we've already done ours, so we know where we need to set it, which is at 24 inches from the top of the shock to the center of the lower shock mounting hole. So now we can go ahead and install our shock. Now at this point, we can go ahead and install our shock. We're going to light it up with the two holes at the top and then insert our lower shock mount into the lower control arm. Now to do this can be a little bit tricky, so what you're going to want to do is go ahead and compress your shock and then move quickly to get it inserted into the slot where it's supposed to go and into the lower control arm. So we've got our shock compressed. Now we'll go ahead and insert it into the vehicle. Now at this point, we can go ahead, insert our lower shock bolt. Attach our nut, and then using the original hardware, go ahead and install our upper shock bolt. And once we've got everything started, we'll go ahead and tighten down our upper shock bolts using our 16mm socket. All right, now we can start tightening down our lower shock mounting bolt using our 18mm wrench and our 15mm socket. And now we can go ahead and reattach our exhaust hangers using the original hardware and our 13mm socket. All right, now it's a little bit difficult to get the camera up in here because of the tight clearances, but you remember where it's at when you uninstalled it in the beginning. So we'll go ahead and get our bolt started. And now we'll tighten it down with our 13mm socket. Now we're tightening down our front one. All right, now that we've got one side completely installed, you can repeat this whole process for the other side. Now, once you get everything installed, make sure you go back and double check everything, torque everything down to factory recommended specifications, and then before you take it out for a drive down the road, Make sure you schedule this for an alignment because we did change the geometry of the ride height and everything, so you are going to need an alignment performed on this to make it safe for you to drive. Now that we've got everything on the bottom tightened up, we can go ahead and tighten up our 3 nuts at the top of our strut with our 12mm socket. We'll go ahead and replace our strut cover cap, and we're done. And that wraps up our review and install of the Five8 Industries SS Sport Coil-Over Kit for the 11 and newer Charger, excluding the Scat Pack and SRT Hellcat. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things Charger, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.